He's a faculty member in the Third College. You see, ST was just being built, and the Third College was for minorities, blacks and Hispanic. Well, he sat down and he started talking about politics, black power, third world politics, and I'm just a wallflower, I'm not getting into this. But then we started talking about education. And I said, I don't care whether the student's white, black, Hispanic, I don't even notice. I don't even care what his background is. He has to know chemistry before he gets out of my course, because he's not going to do well in life unless he knows his subject. And this guy looked at me and he says, "You're right." He says, "Your course is tough." I know, because I'm tutoring 2 students in your course. He says, "Our worst enemies are these white liberals that come over to the Third College, teach watered-down classes to our students, and turn them into permanent second-class citizens." Today, the education establishment is turning all of our students into permanent second-class citizens. Now, that isn't an indictment of all schools. We have a lot of great teachers. Most young people that go into education are dedicated, they're idealistic, they do the very best they can. And the schools across the country vary a lot. Washington, D.C. is, of course, not typical. But America used to have the best schools in the world. Our kids scored the highest in the world in everything. And that is the reason that we dominate the world in technology and science and industry. Now we're at the bottom of the developed nations, about 30th in the world. We're at the low. We have the worst. Our students have the worst records in the world. We had no homeschooling when I went to school. I went to the public schools. I got a great education 50 years ago. That got me into Caltech. That got me a great life in science. I've had a wonderful life because of the public schools. But those schools aren't with us anymore, except in isolated areas where dedicated people are making the system work in spite of the problems. And I believe, and when you think about running for Congress, you think about things you might uniquely be able to do. They need at least one scientist in that building, and I'd like to be that scientist. My friend Harrison Schmidt got the opportunity. Harrison, you may remember, he campaigned with us in 2010. He was the last guy that landed a vehicle on the surface of the moon. But he was also a Caltech scientist like me. And Harrison was then, because of his notoriety, elected to the Senate for one term. And he said he was the only problem solver in the room. A problem would come up, and of course his training was to propose a solution. It didn't mean that he was always right, but he proposed a solution. He said nobody else would. The career politician doesn't want to solve a problem. He wants to turn the problem to his electoral advantage. The problem, if the problem goes away, you can't take advantage of it. I'll give you a couple of examples. One is our forest problem, right? I don't have to teach you about what happened to our forests and our lumber industry. Now, what should have happened was our congressman should have led a fight with every commissioner behind them to force the federal government to honor its contracts and let our forest people use our resource. They didn't do that. What did they do? They got us welfare. They got welfare for the counties. We'll get you some money. Now, that was not solving the problem. That was riding on the problem. Because as soon as they had the counties hooked on the money, they could say, hey, re-elect me or your money might stop coming. They rode on the problem. We have the same thing with the VA. Now, Pete DeFazio never tires of going down to Roseburg and talking about how he really wants to fix these problems with the VA. They've kind of got his number, because I've won Douglas County 3 times in a row. But he does diminish the vote. He's got that. He's always got veterans calling, and a veteran calls and has trouble with the VA. He gets the constituent service, they help him out, this gets votes and so forth. But what he really should be doing is going over into the VA and say, why am I getting these calls? I don't want these calls. But he wants the calls because that helps him to get reelected. And the problem is trivial to solve. We promised our veterans the best medical care that America can provide without cost, as one of the things we give them in appreciation for their service. And that's easy. You give every one of them a card and say, go wherever you want in this country, get any medical care you like, and it's paid for. If you want to go to the VA, fine. If you want to go to the Mayo Clinic, fine. That's done. The problem is trivial to solve. The reason Pete and his friends don't solve that problem is because it gets them votes. They've turned the problem until they can ride on it. And that's what a career politician does. As he mentioned, in our first 100 years of our country, the average congressman served one term, 2 years. Very few served 2 terms. Now it's 12, and Pete's been there 30 years. And if you want to know why he's been there 30 years, and he's hard to displace, think about this. In each, if you take the amount of money that's spent and the number of congressmen and senators spending it, each one, including Pete, his share is $20 billion. In 30 years, in a 2-year term. So in 30 years, that's $300 billion. That's his share of the expenditures. And he makes sure that's spent for the special interests that'll get him reelected. You want to know why it's hard to throw one of these guys out. That's it. And so the career politician, once he decides he wants a career, he votes for himself and not for us, and certainly not for the Republic.